Go. All right. So I say they're a responsibility because everybody thinks that the ponds, 365 of them in Plymouth alone, are going to be just fine without any kind of stewardship. That just isn't true. It actually makes the responsibility even greater. So we'll get into that. And even more important, we know that safe drinking water is an existential issue. Let's see. I'm not talking about the Herring Ponds Watershed Association. I had a presentation to do that, but I'm not doing that tonight because I assume that you can talk to me afterwards if you're interested in more. We have literature over there. And I also forgot to thank SEMPA for this beautiful facility.
You're welcome.
Yes. So what do we know about pollution? Well, we know that the source is phosphorus. We've had algae blooms. We have cyanobacteria blooms. Cyanobacteria blooms are by far worse because it's possible to have toxins involved in those. Dogs die, children get hurt, and people have sensitive reactions to just being in contact with them. So where does phosphorus come from? Well, in this area, number one is from septic. Number two is from sediment. Number three is from runoff. And the septic and the runoff are transported through soil. Okay, they get into the groundwater. They head for the low part. They eventually get into the aquifer, which is underneath us, 550 billion gallons, where we get our drinking water from. Good news is that our sandy soil contains iron. And iron slows down the transport of phosphorus in the soil. It's a chemical bond. Am I in your way? I'm sorry, I'll move over. So what happens when soil is removed? Well, there's two things that happen, but they both have the effect of reducing the amount of time that it takes the phosphorus to get into our aquifer and into our groundwater and into our ponds. Number one, the amount of iron binder is reduced. You take soil with iron in it away, there's less iron that can hold the phosphorus and keep it from getting into our water. And number two, you're just physically reducing the distance between the ground level and the aquifer. So those two things make it a lot easier for the phosphorus to get into our water supply, to get into our ponds, to get into our drinking water. So I'm going to repeat why we're here. We're here because we know what happens when the facts are ignored. We have lived through it in our watershed in Great Herring Pond. And here's what's happened to us. In 2020, 2021, and 2024, this summer, we had blooms, cyanobacteria blooms. The worst one was in 2020. Great Herring Pond was under advisory for 2 months in 2020. In the summer, you think, well, people really don't like that. I'll bet they don't. 2 weeks in 2021 and 3 weeks this summer. There have been 2 dogs dead because of cyanobacteria in 2020. And there have been several that have had to go to the vet for some serious treatment. We had one person in our watershed who just by swimming in it had a reaction that landed her in the hospital. It's just much like poison ivy. Some people are allergic, some people are not. The worst thing that the cyanobacteria can do is produce a toxin that works on your liver, works on your pancreas, works on your nervous system. But that has to be ingested. Hopefully that's all right. So now what? This is all about our water. It's all about the water, and the water is important. because the water is an existential thing. We can't live without it. Animals can't live without it. Birds can't live without it. Insects, pollinators can't live without it. Those responsible in Plymouth just don't get it. These are the people who are our water gurus. They're the select board. They don't get it.
Decision makers.
What happens if we pollute? What happens if we pollute our aquifer? If we pollute the aquifer, we have to drill down through bedrock. That's fun, right? That's cheap, right? Is there water underneath there? Probably not as much as 550 billion gallons. So we have to keep up the pressure. That's what we're here for tonight. We have to keep the pressure up. We have to make sure that these people understand what's at stake here, because it's going to get worse. One of the bad things about cyanobacteria is the cyanobacteria is much more prolific in the warmer weather. And how many of us don't think that the weather is going to get warmer? Okay. Oh, Don Trump back there. All right. So, my distinct pleasure tonight is to set the stage for Meg Sheehan. I am really honored to introduce her, and she's going to talk about the sand mining that's going on. And we already know why removal of sand isn't that good an idea. Tonight, we're privileged to share this forum with Meg Sheehan, who is an environmental lawyer, a Plymouth native, and a tireless worker for our fragile and regional environment. You know, I really feel sorry for trees. They can't move. They can't get out of the way. The same thing is true of aquifers. They can't get out of the way either. So it has to be up to us. So when was the last time that you met someone who was larger than life? I am not exaggerating here.
Your father.
Like father, like daughter. Who is an active advocate of clean air and clean water, and who is willing to work pro bono to fight for what is right. Well, tonight you will meet that someone. And Meg's been doing what she does best for 40 years. It's not me. Studying sand mining in the region for 10 years. A co-founder of many campaigns, including the Community Land and Water Coalition and Save the Pine Barrens, and more. And she has been a hero of mine for as long as I have known her. So please stand and welcome her. Okay, I want to do share again. And Meg's, right? Is that good?
Meg, do you want me your slides?
Sure, that would be great.
Can you take it from here? It's up.
All right, well, great. I have never gone on a welcome like that. I've gotten many slides, but thank you very much to the Hearing Pond Watershed Association, to Dawn and Jerry and everyone, and to Simba. And I really want to acknowledge a couple of special guests that we have here. One is my lovely daughter and her partner, who are here all the way from out west. And it's really great to be able to share this with her. And she's a designer of our t-shirts and our logos and whatnot. And especially Rep Fernandez, Dylan Fernandez is here. He's our conversations about sand mining and the impact, and maybe some legislative solutions that we can be looking forward to, hopefully in November. So my talk is about sand and gravel mining. I thought I would focus on Cedarville Village because we've got two proposals here. I wanted to go over some of the history of what's happened here, some of the ancient history of the people who have lived here long before we have. So, next slide. Here's our agenda. I'll do a little overview of where we are, a review of the projects. We're here particularly tonight because we're concerned about a 33-acre mining project that is allegedly for a commercial development on Hedges Pond Road at 71 Hedges Pond Road, an area that a lot of people thought was land that was put aside for conservation back in 1993. We'll also talk about the role of an organization called the Plymouth Foundation. You might have known it in its previous iteration as the Plymouth Economic Development Foundation, and its role in sand mining throughout our town. And I'll go a little more into the specifics of what happened with the conservation area and how it got into the hands of the sand mining industry today. And then we'll end with a great film, short little 5-minute documentary that's part of a series about the impacts of sand and gravel mining and other activities in our state on Indigenous history, and how our state agency, the Mass Historic Commission, is not doing what we think it should be doing. So with that, a little bit about me and my interest in this. As Dawn said, I've been an environmental activist since I was 13, and my mother keeps reminding me I put a no nuke sign on our front lawn on Warren Ave when they were starting to build Pilgrim. So it was downhill from there in a lot of people's view. I have had a lot of fun, and I am so privileged to be able to do this kind of work, follow my passion, and meet so many great people along the way. About 10 years ago, I started to get very concerned about the sand and gravel mining that is going on here. As you may know, because we're in glacial outwash plain, we have large deposits in these hills of very valuable sand and gravel. It's a global commodity. In the last 5 years or so, we have learned that there's a global shortage of sand. There are sand wars happening all over the world. And the sand that we have here includes, these hills include boulders, which are very valuable, as you may have seen from looking at all the armoring that's going on our beaches. But we also have silica sand, and that's what's really valuable. It's a particular type of sand that has quartz-like sharp edges that binds together for concrete. You'll see the trucks, they're going as fast as they can to get as much sand out of here as they can. In 2015, Emily Clark and the Oak Colony Memorial talked about Plymouth being the sand capital of the South Shore. Well, I really believe Plymouth County is one of the sand capitals in the United States, if not the world. And in our view, there could be a lot more regulation of this. I started off with my first sand and gravel case on the county woodlot in Plymouth. As you may know, on Long Pond Road is now a proposal for a casino, or there was, or a dog track. But before that, there was one of the town's highest hills as of 2016. And this is of particular interest for tonight's talk, because that was land that people thought was in conservation. It was the Plymouth County woodlot. We had fields where people flew their kites, walked their dogs, nature observation. Hunters were calling me, this is the highest hill. What's happening? Well, the county somehow got a hold of it and leased the county woodlot to the largest sand and gravel operators in the region. And the lease of the land entailed taking down a hill and digging a 50-foot hole. The town zoning board of appeals, the town fathers went along with this. Apparently there was some kind of earth removal fee paid, but now we are left with a hole. And when you strip mine a sandy topography like this, you are left with a desert. And according to scientists that have studied this issue for us, nothing much will grow again here in a human time frame. We have soils that are 33,000 years old or more that took that long to build up on top of that sand, and we're carting it away for green roofs in Waltham and places that I've seen with my daughter. So this was all coming to a head I was just getting so many calls from concerned residents that we put together a report. It's called Sand Wars in Cranberry Country. We have a short little 10-minute documentary, a 5-minute version. We investigated the money, politics, and corruption behind sand mining and the silent environmental crisis in southeastern Mass. And you can Google sand wars or sand mafia, and you can see, again, this is a global issue. So we really get a handle on this, and there's documented in this report 110 historic and active sites across Plymouth County, and that's the tip of the iceberg. 2,500 acres at least have been strip mined. Absolutely no environmental impact reports, no archaeological reports, and this is all regulated on the local level as a land use. And that's really the problem. And that's where the county woodlot comes into place, and especially the case that we're going to be talking about tonight in Cedarville. So check that out. We're here. I know John talked a little bit, but I wanted to point out that this is an area of critical environmental concern designated by the state. These mining sites are kind of outside of that, but we are over the sole source aquifer. This shows the ACEC and the wells of protection. So there's a lot of information you can get about where these sites are in relation to our underground water supplies. And again, that's the underground water supply for 7 towns, 200 square miles, and about 200,000 people. Shows you there all of the towns that are served by the aquifer. And the water knows no boundaries. What we do in Plymouth, the Carver, affects everyone. The underground aquifer is all sand. It has high transmissivity. It moves at about 100 feet a day. So if you pollute something here, it's going to be at your neighbor's yard in a couple of days. So there's a lot's been done in the past. As Don mentioned, I have been doing this for a long time. A lot of us worked on getting the sole source aquifer designated and many other initiatives. And one of the things that has languished is this sole source aquifer study. Urge you to look it up. The Old Colony Planning Council is looking into that now and trying to look at a regional approach for our water. So let's talk about the projects here in Cedarville. So we have the historic and active projects of concern. Now, I'm not talking about, there's lots of little ones, but so we have on Hedges Pond Road, the Plymouth Foundation. Now it's known as Cantor Court and CC Construction. In 2008, it obtained an earth removal permit from the town of Plymouth to remove what eventually ended up being 500,000 cubic yards, a lot of sand. Then we had PA Landers around the same time, taking down half of Mountain Hill. You can see that right from Route 3. You know, people might have heard about, you know, unfortunately someone died in an accident there. Mr. Landers did go to federal prison for his sand mining activities in Plymouth. And then we also have Sorrenti Brothers, which is another site that we have reported to the town, but they claim nothing's happening. The proposed 2 sites, one is at 1929 State Road, Indian Head Resort. You may have heard about that. Some of the neighbors are very concerned. There have been 4 lawsuits. The town actually denied this permit, and the landowner is seeking to take out the sand and gravel, a large project, and has again engaged in 4 lawsuits. The opponents won 3, and it's headed for a showdown in court soon, I'm told. And then finally, 71 to 73 Hedges Pond Road. This is the 33-acre project that's now in front of the planning board and the town of Plymouth. And the thing I really want to focus on again is the politics of all this and the local issues, the Plymouth Foundation, its role. This is a project that's being proposed by Standish Investment Management. Its sole owner is an attorney, Rob D'Ambrosio, who's local attorney here in Plymouth, who represents EJ Pontiff Development. You might have read about this in the Plymouth Independent today. But Mr. Pontiff has been involved in many sand mining operations around here. They're all documented in our Sand Wars report with copies of the permits and the areas that have been impacted. Right now, I'm representing abutters to a 50-acre project that he is doing on the Federal Furnace Cranberry property in Carver on Tremont Street. That is a 900-acre cranberry bog site where there has been 100 acres of mining over the last 10 to 15 years. It was formerly owned by Mr. Morrison, who's now on the Conservation Commission in Plymouth. He sold that land to Mr. Pontiff, who's now mining it, claiming he's building cranberry bogs. And just a word about cranberry agriculture. We are not against legitimate cranberry growing by any way, in any way. We are against cranberry companies, sand and gravel mining companies, who portray themselves as cranberry operators to evade local regulations. And how that works is our local and state laws have a lot of exemptions when it comes to land uses. Churches get preferential treatment, agriculture gets preferential treatment, to give you a few examples. So cranberry agriculture is, some of the cranberry growers are exploiting that exemption. And if you know anything about cranberry growing, you know that sand has historically been used to nourish the bogs. Every 5 years, they'll go around and spread 2 or 3 inches across the bogs. Typically, bogs were built out of natural wetlands or out of upland, and they would have a burrow pit next to the bog, and they would take their sand and spread it. So all of a sudden, taking down hills over 50 acres and getting $24 million worth of sand and gravel out of it has been portrayed as agriculture, and the state and local regulators are going along with it. So this is explained very thoroughly in our Sand Wars report. So these are some of the projects that Mr. Pontiff has been involved in and is involved in today. We have a wetlands appeal also on the project in Carver, and the work has been altering a brook, Crane Brook, according to our experts. The State Department of Environmental Protection is allowing Mr. Pontiff to continue with this 50-acre mining operation, despite the fact that you're not supposed to mine in wetlands or do any work in wetlands without a permit. I guess I'm being past this story. Anyway, you also might be familiar with a large pond here in South Plymouth off of Firehouse Road. A lot of people called me about all the trucks coming off of Bourne Road. That was Mr. Pontiff and Mr. Landers working together to mine a hill and create a tailwater pond. This is another aspect of cranberry agriculture that, in my mind, is exploited in order to mine sand and gravel out of the ground. Take down the hill, you want more sand and gravel, you keep digging 50 feet down. And you say, oh, this is just a water pond for my cranberries. And of course, we all know the cranberry industry is beleaguered, as our state agencies tell us. So whether this is really for cranberry agriculture is a questionable proposition. So we have his pond on Firehouse Road there, which, by the way, was also a cranberry bog that he purchased from Mr. Morrison, just like he did the one in Carver. It was Federal Furnace Cranberry. So just to point out where some of these are, some of the threats that have happened. We've got Sorrento here, this is Cedarville, we've got the new one here, we've got Landers here, we've got the Plymouth Foundation here, and here's Ellisville Road, which is considered the northern boundary of Cedarville.
That's just it zoomed in.
Oh yeah, that's it zoomed in. So if this project goes ahead at 71 Hedges Pond Road, we'll have a swath of 100, 200 acres of sand and gravel mining along here. Not something that I think is necessary for commercial development. This is a time lapse showing, 2008, what some of these sites look like, and in particular, this is the Plymouth Development Foundation, sand and gravel mine that again was permitted by the town. So I'll stop here and I'll talk more about this specific project, or maybe jump to the next slide and we'll say this one to the end. So the timeline, this is on the Cedarville project. We have put up a blog on our website that contains a lot of very specific information if you want more documents that backs up this. So obviously before this, it was Herring Pond land, Herring Pond tribe land. I'll talk about it more in the end, but it was part of the Great Lot and the Herring Pond Reservation. In 1993, the town meeting voted to put 175 acres of land into the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. This is land that the town had acquired to build a new landfill, but landfills were going out of style for many environmental reasons. So people decided, let's put it into conservation. Well, it went into the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, but they never took any action to formally preserve it, which is not uncommon. It happens. Everybody thinks, oh, we did it, and it's now in the hands of the Conservation Commission. We can rely on it being protected forever. That didn't happen. The town was going through its lists of land that it owned, figuring out how can we, this is my take, how can we make money off of this? So in 2018, they identified the Cedarville Conservation Area. You can look at a map and you can see, there it is, the Cedarville Conservation Area. Well, why don't we try to make some money off that? So they carved out a portion of that land, the one that we're talking about tonight, and they went to town meeting. This was the select board and the town planning department with 3 warrant articles to authorize the select board to transfer the land to the Board of Selectmen, which they did. The Board of Selectmen then turned around and sold the land to the Plymouth Foundation for $1. So it's gone from conservation, a town meeting, what everybody thought it was going to be anyway, to now the Plymouth Foundation, who now has a purchase and sale agreement with Mr. Pontiff to put in a unified complex, a zoning rules in my view, to put in commercial development. Here's the rub. They all say, we have to lower the hill because we can't build on hills. Well, town hall is built on a hill. All of a sudden today, we can't build anything on hills. We have to level everything. So Mr. Pontiff is telling the town that the site has to be leveled in order to make it commercially valuable. And this is where the land use rub is. People are saying you're preventing me from any reasonable use of my property if I can't mine this. Well, there has to be a balance of what's in the public interest. We have zoning laws for the public health, safety, and welfare protection. There comes a point where your private use of your land, whether it's, for a piggery, those are the old zoning cases, in a residential neighborhood, you can't do it. You have to move out into the agricultural district. So it's not new that we have zoning laws. It's just that in Plymouth, as John was mentioning, we don't always look out for the public interest, in my view. So this property got into the hands of the Plymouth Foundation, which I really am concerned about and urge people to look into. I have done a little bit of looking into it. As I mentioned I think we have the slide of this. In 2008, this organization went to the zoning board of appeals and got a permit to mine that land on Hedges Pond Road. Again, where Cantor Court is today. We have a picture of it somewhere. It was a huge mining operation. It was about 500,000 cubic yards. By today's prices, that's probably $10 million worth of sand and gravel. Then they turned around and they sold it to a developer, a Tonker truck. This is
Sorry,
another one,
this
but
isn't-
this is kind of what, in my mind, Cedarville would look like. This is the project on Route 3 going south. This was a project that we were involved in. This was a project to create a unified complex, the same zoning term we're hearing today with the Hedges Pond project, to put in a manufacturing building to hide the building from the view of tourists on Route 3. Now, I was at those hearings. I recorded it before anybody started to record meetings. And I heard the developer, Mr. Spencer, talk about that time after time. I heard Mr. Quinville, the chair of our select board, promote this project and tell us that it was great for our community. It was going to generate revenue for the town. All it generates is a few dollars in earth removal fees. And we have a sand and gravel mining operation because the landowner claimed they couldn't build within the existing topography. However, if you go into the industrial park, you can see that, you know, the gym and the Y and other places are built within existing topography. So this is really, in my mind, poster child. A lot of us tried really hard to stop this project. We weren't successful. And here's what it looks like today. They've been mining in the aquifer. This is completely illegal. The permit has expired. It was supposed to be a 2-year project. We're on year 4. So again, this is how Plymouth deals with sand and gravel mining operations. Just going to be a unified complex for a manufacturing building, and then you have this, you know, 5 years later. So, back to our Plymouth Foundation. Like I said, I have been researching this for a long time. I have looked at 110 earth removal permits for many of them in Plymouth, probably 50 of them. And I have seen that the Zoning Board of Appeals has given sand and gravel mining permits to this entity now called the Plymouth Foundation. The foundation has mined the site in Cedarville, generated revenue, turned around and sold the land to Tonka Truck, Cantor Court, and this is what it's planning to do with the Pontiff project at 71 Hedges Pond Road. My question is, the Plymouth Foundation is a charitable organization, an IRS 501c3, supposed to be organized solely for the public benefit, charitable, scientific purposes, etc. Why is that organization in the sand and gravel business? What law allows a charitable 501c3 to mine the sand and gravel, collect revenues, who knows where they went, and then turn around and sell the land? Land that they originally acquired for $1 from the town of Plymouth. Something's not right. The people who are on that foundation currently are the chair of the Board of Selectmen. The town planner, Mr. Hartman, has been on there for 20 years. The town manager, Mr. Murdisi, state representative Matthew Muratori, Mr. Mayo, town developer, D. Wallace Spencer, related to the Spencer project on Route 3, and a slew of developers. Now, they claim they are private organizations, so they don't have to act with the type of transparency and accountability that is required of government bodies. You know, we all get the agendas for the planning board, the select board, we get their minutes, we know what's going on, except when they're in executive session. But I have done a public records request for all the agendas and minutes of the Plymouth Foundation. They do not exist. They are claiming they are not a municipal body. They are a private foundation doing business and negotiating this deal for Cedarville, apparently going to collect the sand and gravel revenue or facilitate the use of the sand and gravel revenue for the traffic light, the $2 million traffic light that they promise will be built if this project goes ahead. So we really need to get to the bottom of the story, and I will just come back to our report. This Plymouth isn't the only town where there are some, I will say, questionable activities with regard to sand and gravel mining. And that, in my mind, is why our state Office of Inspector General is investigating the sand and gravel mining business in southeastern Mass. Now, the Office of the Inspector General is an independent, standalone organization. There's a federal one, there's a state one. They investigate waste, fraud, and abuse of public resources. And we know that they are investigating the sand and gravel mining business because in 2023, they went to the Carver Town Hall, after Plymouth, probably Carver has a lot more permits, but Plymouth has some really big ones. And they seized all the records of the Earth Removal Committee, which is the body in Carver that gives out the permits. In Plymouth, you have the Zoning Board of Appeals. In Wareham, you have the Select Board. So depending on your town, different boards have authority. They seized the records of the Earth Removal Committee. They interviewed the Finance Department, seized records from the Finance Department. Now all the earth removal records are held in a safe in the basement, and they went to several businesses and individuals involved with the town government and sand mining and knocked on their doors and, I believe, issued subpoenas. So hopefully we'll be hearing something about that. It's not, I don't think, in anyone's imagination that we need more accountability and transparency around this industry and what's happening. And so I just urge you to get in touch with us, let us know, go to meetings, attend meetings.
We're having a meeting.
We've heard that the planning board is having an information session. It was supposed to be tomorrow night, then it was pulled off, now it's back on. Wednesday night, I'm sorry. So please try to go to that and go to any meetings and keep your eye on what's happening. And, there are probably legitimate uses for earth removal. This issue is not new. It's been around forever, for 200 years, since they started mining for sand and sandwich for glass. But it reached a point in the 1990s where all of the towns around here passed very stringent earth removal bylaws to permit and control this industry. In the meantime, things have slipped. We have different ideas about what is legitimate sand and gravel mining and what is not. And I think we need to get educated and hold our town officials accountable. So we've got fact sheets, join our organization, etc. I'll go back to the map of Cedarville that shows the indigenous lands here. And this has been an issue, again, as I mentioned, with sand mining throughout southeastern Mass. It's the ancestral home of the Wampanoag people. Now, normal land development, okay, you might dig a foundation. You don't go out and obliterate 50 acres and level hills by 100 feet. Like, that's a serious impact that should be looked at seriously from an environmental perspective and from an archaeological perspective. And these projects in Cedarville are in the heart of what is known, and I want to speak for the indigenous people, but my understanding is the heart of the Great Law, which this is Herring Pond Wampanoag tribes land. Originally, it was ancestrally, of course, they used it. But in the 1850s, Massachusetts was the first state to pass a law to make an Indian reservation. And the first Indian reservation in the United States was in Cedarville, in this area here. I'm sorry, Linda?
1650s.
1850s was the Indian Act, right?
1650s were the first reservations here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so the land was parceled out and given to the Wampanoag people who were living here at the time, and they were given lots and common lands together. And through time, some of that land, or most of that most of that land or all that land has obviously not, stayed in the hands of the Wampanoag people. But in my view, when you're doing a project like this, you should at least do an archaeological study. And especially when you know that your sandmine in Cedarville is in an area designated on a historic map as an ancient Indian reservation. And with that said, I would just bring it up to the next level. You know, you ask Lee Hartman, like I have done, people will call me and say that I see arrowheads all over the ground. What should I do? You know, my neighbor is doing X, Y, and Z, or the sand mine or whatever. Well, he will say, call the Mass Historic Commission. So who is the Mass Historic Commission? The chair is our Secretary of State, Mr. Galvin. It is made up of 11 appointed officials by statute, building industry, et cetera, representatives of different industries. But there has never been an Indigenous person on our state Mass Historic Commission. And I am told that for every 300 colonial sites that Mass Historic Commission requires a study of or some level of protection for, it only protects one Indigenous site. So that's kind of concerned with the sand mining. We see it happening. I have people calling me and saying, look at all the artifacts that I found at this site. I found a paleo point, people have brought to me. Very, very significant archaeological artifacts that should belong in the Smithsonian Institution are in these piles of sand and gravel.
And burials
Burials.
that have been dug up,
Right.
because I've seen them.
Right. So with that
Justice.
said, our last piece of, you know, part of the presentation is a short film by Tyler Chase. She is here from New York City. She's been working on a 6-part documentary about the Mass Historic Commission and protection of archaeological resources in Massachusetts. And it's a short 5-minute film. And after that, we'll have Q&A. And thank you very much for your attention.